So for Final Fantasy 16, I'm going to start with that because I truly believe Final Fantasy 16 is going to come before Part 2. I think that game is almost ready to go. In fact, Audrey on Twitter, we all love Audrey on Twitter. Here we go. I can bring that up now. She has her a quote that she translated from Yoshi P. We are in the final stages of development for the new numbered game in the series, Final Fantasy XVI. We aim to deliver a comprehensive game full of story and gameplay. Unlike an online game that involves many players at the same time, Final Fantasy XVI offers a different experience where it focuses on the individual player and immerses you in the story. I think it's a very fleshed out story. For those who have grown up and realized that reality isn't kind to you, and have drifted away from Final Fantasy, we hope that Final Fantasy XVI will be a game that can bring back anew the passion that you once had with the series. So it seems like right there off the bat, Vinny, it seems like Yoshi P is addressing. He's like, I mean, it doesn't seem like it. He is actually addressing the. I guess the divisiveness that has arisen within the fandom about like, hey, I loved Final Fantasy 15. I love that game so much. It is up there in my. It's like an S tier, A tier game for me, but it is a divisive game in the series. Like people didn't like the direction that they're taking it. Some people don't even like the direction that they're going with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Also, some people don't like that they're remaking Final Fantasies. They want new Final Fantasy experiences. And it seems like this is it. And then before, 15, we had 13, which was very divisive. 14, this is obviously Yoshi P's, 14 is Yoshi P's game, but that's an online game, so he's already just like saying, hey, it's like unlike that, this is a single player experience. So with all that said, he's addressing that right off the bat there, Vinny. So what are your thoughts on this statement in particular before we get into predicting?
I think that it's nice to hear from somebody and kind of make me feel like they're listening, because they're not totally shooting down or disregarding the fact that people do have complaints and that they are worried, and that it's we they know that we have a passion for these games enough to put out a comment like this. So they know that the majority of the community love these games as much as they love making them. So it's kind of like a reassuring, like we're listening. And to everybody who has complaints and stuff, I mean, complaining about it is great. When you're passionate enough about something, complaining about it is great. But it does seem like they are listening. So it's probably definitely worth voicing your opinion to a more direct source, like, emailing somebody or directly tagging somebody in something to where your voice is going to be seen. Because if you have a problem with something, the best way to deal with that problem is to just try and be active about it and in its direction. So it seems like they are listening, and that it's kind of reassuring that
Yeah.
they're saying that they're going to rekindle that passion that we've had. Because I mean, I like the new Final Fantasies, but the best thing about the series, that even if I don't like one of their newest games, I always have their old stuff to fall back on.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
I you know
This is really cool of Yoshi P to be like, hey, we're hoping that this can be that new game that you fall back on. Like this is that Final Fantasy that you've been waiting for.
mhm,
And that's just like, I mean, that's obviously speaking to not only those people, those fans, but also this is exciting for fans that enjoyed Final Fantasy 15 and like, I mean, and the recent Final Fantasy games. Like, this is not a shot at that at all. This is just saying like, hey, this is going to be an experience for those Final
mhm,
Fantasy fans. And here it comes. It's going to be a fully fleshed out story. He thinks it's a very fleshed out story, which was some complaints about 15. People thought that, I mean, it was Noctis's story, which I loved, but this seems like he's taking into consideration like, hey, this is a big world. This is a fully fleshed out world. It's an individual player experience. Over here, Subtext had a question. He's like, so no party? And he's like talking to Night Sky Prince. Individual player means, as opposed to online player. So like right off the bat, Night Sky Prince kind of nails it on the head right there. I think he's just saying like, hey, this is an individual, single player game. We don't know if there's party in this game yet, like a party system. We don't know that. It's I don't know. We'll have to wait until spring, which we're in spring right now. But yeah.
At the same time, though, it's like everybody who thinks that they're not going to like it if it is a single person party, like we don't know until we play it. So I personally didn't think I was going to like Final Fantasy 15's more action oriented combat system, because I love Final Fantasy X's conditional RPG combat system. But I like 15. I didn't think I was going to like it, because I was like, if I want this, I could just play Kingdom Hearts. But I liked it. I liked 15's combat. It was different. And I went into it thinking, I don't know if I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
Same thing with this. Like, I don't know if I'm going to like a Final Fantasy where I don't have a party, where I don't feel like camaraderie or anything. But who knows? Because maybe a party just doesn't benefit the story. Maybe you need to feel like you're alone in the story. You don't know.
Yeah.
Being alone might, further immerse yourself in the story.
Yeah, and like, where does he say it? Where for those who have grown up and realized that the reality isn't kind to you, I feel like that is about the story. That's not about like reality is not a kind to you and have drifted away from Final Fantasy. Like, I don't think he's saying like you've drifted away from Final Fantasy, that's not kind. I think he's saying the story, like you've grown up and realized that reality isn't kind to you. I think that's the theme of the story.
Right. And things get lost in translation too, because I know languages don't really translate one-to-one all the time with words. So
I think he's talking about how this is the theme of the story. And for me, that makes me very excited. If it's going to be a mature story, it's going to be about loss, that reality is not kind to you. This is my kind of game, man. This is my kind of Final Fantasy. I want this. I'm so excited about that. So let's talk about... Okay, go ahead, Benny.
I think this is going to be a real rated M Final Fantasy. Like, Stranger of Paradise, I think, had the rated M and didn't capitalize on all of the rated M it could have been. But I think 16 is really going to, because you have that one part in the trailer where his like mom gets gushed, and like it's just like he has mommy blood on his face and stuff, right?
I don't know if it was what was it? Somebody got crushed and blood went all over this kid, and you know what I mean?
All right.
So yeah, I'm hoping the same thing. I'm also thinking like time has gone on, and I'm not sure if they're fully confident in releasing a Final Fantasy mainline as rated M. Like, I don't even know what to expect.
Like Type 0 was M, wasn't it?
Yes, Type 0
and
was
Type
M.
0 did fine. I think they need to lean into it.
Yeah. So I hope they really lean into it. I hope they're not like I hope they don't back off of it, because it seemed like they were going for rated M, and then like I hope they update it and then say, all right, let's just go for the teen rating to get the, this is for all Final Fantasy fans, so keeping it teen gives you a bigger audience and all that other stuff. I hope they lean into the rated M, but I just don't see them using like harsh language with the setting that they're in. I guess. I mean, unless they go kind of Game of Thrones style. Regardless, that's all speculation. Only thing, the main point of this whole thing is that I'm just so excited that it seems like it's grown up and realized that reality isn't kind to you type thing. Like, this is going to be a very mature story, and that quote right there gets me excited. The last thing we heard from Yoshi P was talking about how we'll have the next big info drop spring 2022. That was back when they announced the delay, the 6-month delay of Final Fantasy 16. He said, we're about 6 months behind schedule. And he said that we'll have more information in spring. So to circle back to our predictions.
Are you about to segue into Remake Part 2?
No, I was going to give my predictions on like the timeline of Final Fantasy 16.
Okay.
Like where I think, announcements to release. Um, so with them saying that they were 6 months behind, I'm just kind of reiterating what I said 6 months ago when they announced the delay. I had predicted that Final Fantasy 16 was going to release in summer of 2022, so that would have been around this time, in a couple months. Um, Uniqlo, which was just released their pictures for 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy, was T-shirts for Final Fantasy 1 through 16. They even had a Final Fantasy 16 shirt. This is probably not that big of a deal, but I feel like this was already something set in place, set in motion. This deal or whatever with Uniqlo was set in set in place months before the delay. Like this was in the works. So when they released their images, I feel like that was already on a timed, release. Like they were just like, okay, on this date we're going to show off the shirts, we're going to, release them. I think that was supposed to coincide with the release of Final Fantasy 16. Like I think we were supposed to be getting those shirts, building up hype and excitement. Final Fantasy 16 releases in summer. With Yoshi P coming out and saying that they're 6 months behind, like 6 months behind, that makes me think they were also going to show it at the Game Awards in December. So show in December, release in June. 6 months behind, we push that back. I think we're going to see Final Fantasy 16 very soon, which is what Yoshi P said. Spring 2022, we'll see more information. At the Summer Game Fest presentation for Square Enix, whatever that's called, whether it's called Square Enix Presents the Summer Showcase or Square Enix Presents the Spring Showcase or whatever, it's going to be around June. So at the end of May, around June, that's my prediction, during the Summer Game Fest time period, Square Enix presentation, we see Final Fantasy 16. And I think they dropped the release date in the trailer for Final Fantasy 16 during that trailer. And I think December 6th. I'm going to pinpoint December 6th. That is a 6 month, it pushes everything 6 months, basically, going off of what Yoshi P said. Making it December, the reason why I choose December, because November is notorious for Call of Duty. You want to stay away from Call of Duty. I don't care what game you are. You just stay away from Call of Duty. Like, it doesn't matter if you're an RPG or not. Like, you stay away from that. Modern Warfare 2 was just announced. The logo, it's coming. They're going to have an info drop. It's usually November. I think last Call of Duty was October, though. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Check. But I think
they haven't announced it. Oh, you're talking about, like, Vanguard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Vanguard was October-ish, but it's around that time frame, so you kind of stay out of that. But also, if you move it up any further, that kind of gets away from the whole 6 month thing that I was talking about.
They released November 5th, Vanguard.
Oh, all right then. Yeah, so yeah, I mean,
so
like
November.
It's that November time frame that I think they're going to stay away from. If you go a month before that in October, that's Forspoken. October 11th is Forspoken. So now this gives it breathing room between Forspoken, and then November, and then December you get Final Fantasy 16. That's this year. That also kind of goes along with what Yoshi P was saying at one point, where he was like, I want to show the game and then have people excited to go out and buy the game. Like, that's basically what he said, like, rough quote. I'm paraphrasing, I guess. He was like, I want to show the game, fans run out and want to buy the game. So I think he wants to show release. And in order to give enough time to build up hype and anticipation, 6 months is beautiful. So show in summer, release December 6th.
And that's perfect for the holiday season, because then you have people going to buy it for Christmas and all the other holidays that people share gifts in December. So I think a pretty astute.
Yeah, and if I was Square and I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, well we can really work hard and get this game out this year, because I had also wanted to update it to say that they were going to release in spring. I wanted to do that. I wanted to be like, I think it's optimistic to say this year. Let's go spring 2023. But then I'm like, no, you want to stay away from that. Breath of the Wild was just delayed to spring 2023, you do not want to release Final Fantasy 16 at the same time as Breath of the Wild. Like, I think that they're sitting back thinking that too. Like, we jump ahead, we get in there in December, we stay out of that, we stay out of its way. Yeah, and then you could take into consideration of other games, like God of War for PS5 is coming out this year, supposedly. Big releases are coming out this year, and Final Fantasy 16 needs to find its place, and I think December 6th is a good spot for it. What do you think, Vinny? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts in chat as well?
I think December 6th is probably right on the money. Give or take a week or two.
Mm.
But it because your timeline makes a very convincing argument that if they're 6 months behind and they wanted to release in June or May or something,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, December would be their 6 month mark, and it's right around the holiday season, and then it's also surrounded by, you don't want it to get pushed back too long. Like, if it's not going to be ready until, let's say, February, and then they don't want to release in spring, like you said, because Breath of the Wild 2 was, I believe, voted the most anticipated, the next most anticipated game. You don't want to compete with that. And then the further you push 16 out, the more you have to think about other Final Fantasies or other Square games that are coming out that it doesn't want to compete with.
Yeah.
Because they're 16 it's a mainline title, so it's going to want all of the attention it can get. It doesn't want to have to share it. So, and especially if there's a lot of people out there who are like, oh well, I'll buy Remake Part 2 and 16 on the same day. Like,
Yeah,
I
of
don't care.
course.
But then there are people who allot themselves like, oh, I can only buy one video game every 6 months, and
Yeah.
you don't want to have to make those people choose this one or that one. So,
Mhm.
I think it's probably the most strategic if the game is ready to be released by December.
Yeah.
And the beauty and the curse of this day and age is if it's not ready, they always do hot fixes and patches and updates and stuff
Yeah.
to fix it. I
I don't feel like
would
that's I
prefer
don't think
not to
that's
see
Yoshi
that.
piece. I don't think that's his
Yeah,
style. That's
I
not
would
Yoshi P
prefer not to
style.
see that,
Yeah.
but that was Cyberpunk style.
Yeah. Well, that. Hopefully, that never happens again. That blunder.
Right.
Another thing that I'd like to point out. We go over here. Elden Ring is in final stages of development. This was October 3rd, 2021.
Mhm.
So if Elden Ring was in the final stages of development, and who knows, like, I mean, obviously final stage of development could be a span of like a year, it could be, it's a relative term, but if final stages of development, October 3rd, 2021, Elden Ring. So, and then it released when did Elden Ring release?
That was, I
Was it March?
believe, March 18th.
Yeah. So like October, November, December, January, February, March. That's 5 months. That's like a 5 to 6 months, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like when they announced that they're in the final stages of development, and then 5 to 6 months later, you're releasing the game for Elden Ring as an example.
And Elden Ring was pretty complete in its entirety. There were some broken things in the game, but you're not going to find that out until millions of people are playing your game and you're realizing that, things are broken in it. So I think Elden Ring was pretty complete and self-contained
Mhm.
at release. So if they're saying final stages, then, and if final stages means 5 months and it's ready in November, like you said, they're not going to want to compete with Modern Warfare 2, so
Mhm.
might as well just push it back just one more month, fine tune everything, and then release in December.
Yeah. And like if we also go back to when the game was revealed, gosh, what was it? 2020 when it was revealed. At
Elden
the
Ring or Final
No,
Fantasy?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Final Fantasy 16. When
Okay.
Final Fantasy 16 was revealed in December 2020, they were saying that we've already completed basically the game was complete. They're just
Mhm.
working on other things, like little like additional things, which basically means like side quests or getting the voice acting and all this other stuff. And then
Or
it was
doors.
or doors, yeah.
Or doors.
Or invisible doors that you need to whack at for 100
Yeah,
times.
right.
No, like so basically just saying like they were done with the initial stage of development back in 2020, which makes me
Mhm.
think. And then they talked about how what they say it was like June of last year or this time of last year. He made an announcement saying that they had already kind of wrapped up the voiceovers,
Mhm.
like, and they did
Which is
English first. So they said with this game we're doing English voice acting first, um, and if that's already done, they've probably already been kind of working on the Japanese voiceovers and all this other stuff. And
mhm.
voiceovers are like, I don't know, from based off of my very little bit of Final Fan TV knowledge, talking to voice actors and stuff like that. It seems or it appears to be about 6 months prior to release.
Yeah, it's one
Um,
of the final steps,
it's
right?
one of the final steps. So if that was in June and then of last year or July of last year, and then they turn around and said, "Oh, we got to push it back 6 months," it almost feels like, okay, they were supposed to release it in of summer of this year, and they had to
Mhm.
push it back. So it's just all of these things kind of seem to add up that they are so close to being done with this game, and they've been so close to being done with this game for quite some time,
Mhm.
is what it feels like.
So, so there are two things in chat that
Okay.
I want to touch on. So the first we'll do is the most recent.
Okay.
So SubTXT says, "I'm still thinking 16 will be a September release, and that's my hope at least.
Yeah.
Um, the sooner the better for me as well. I hope that I would love it to be in September. September is my birthday, so it'd be a great birthday game. I usually take a week off of work on my birthday, so
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that would be great. But Forspoken, you said is
October 11th.
October 11th. Okay, so September could happen. I don't. Is there anything planned for September,
No, I
like
mean,
big
like
AAA title wise?
it's like that would be an interesting one because that would be like, hey, we are announcing the game in, like, let's say June. Let's just say that's probably around the Summer Game Fest, like my prediction. They announce the game and then they say, hey, we're dropping in September. That's a quick
Mhm.
turnaround. It's not unheard of. Like, it's
Mhm.
possible. Like, and it definitely goes alongside of what he said. I want to show the game and then people go out and buy the game, or pre-order it, essentially.
Mhm.
So it does sound good. September does sound great. It's definitely out of the way of big names like God of War Ragnarok. There he is, right there.
Mhm.
Subtext with another, like, saying God of War Ragnarok. I think it would be out of the way of Ragnarok because I feel like Ragnarok is a October November time frame.
Mhm.
So yeah, like, it would be good. It could support the idea of my idea of, like, saying, like, last year they were going to announce it at the Game Awards and then release it in June of this year.
Mhm.
It could support it because it could have been like they announced it at the Game Awards and then released it in, like, March or April. So it could go with that. September
Mhm.
is I think maybe a little too soon though, in my opinion.
I think it's super optimistic,
Yeah,
but if we see it, I mean, I think at least we will see pre-orders being available September for Final Fantasy 16.
for sure.
I think we'll have a date by September,
Mm-hmm.
if not released by September. I think we'll have pre-orders and we'll get to see what the pre-order bonuses are, and we'll probably have some decent information. I think it's super optimistic to
Mm-hmm.
think September will be the release, but like I said, the sooner the better. I would love a September release for Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
Final Fantasy 15 Uncovered, which was like the big reveal of 15, was March 30th, 2016. The game was the release date for that. I feel like was like September, if I'm not mistaken. It was announced for a September release date, and then it was like, hey, we got to delay that to November 29th.
mhm,
So it's like, I don't know if they would want to do that again, where it's just kind of like, let's just give ourselves the time.
mhm.
Uh, but yeah, that's one thing I wanted to point out. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, so with all of that said, I feel like we have some solid, I don't know, backing behind those predictions.